Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. It's time for another set of challenge tournaments, which are one of my favorite aspects of the game, tackling existing content in different ways, or at least ways you may not have done before. But first, I'd like to announce that I've decided to start streaming Raid on my Twitch channel. I've already mentioned this a couple of times on my community tab page, but I also wanted to mention it in some videos leading up to the first stream, which will be this Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can check what that is in your local time. I've had a Twitch channel for many years, and the primary game that I used to stream was actually RuneScape 3 or RS3, but it has been a while since I've actually streamed that because I chose to focus a little bit more on the YouTube channel and making content for Raid. And so I'm kind of coming back around full circle to start streaming again, but in this case we're going to be streaming Raid Shadow Legends. Starting out, it's just going to be a general hangout Q&A session where I'm just kind of playing the game and chatting with whoever shows up, and so you'll have a chance to interact directly with me as well as observe my normal routine that you guys just don't really see. It just happens behind the scenes when I'm just actually playing the game. So if that's something you're interested in, then the link to my Twitch channel will be in the description box down below. Feel free to drop a follow on the channel, and I hope to see you there on Saturday. Now back to the subject of today's video, the latest iteration of a challenge tournament. In this case, it is Good Old Dragon, featuring only champions from the Telerian League, that being the Bannerlords, Barbarians, Sacred Order, and High Elves. And honestly, I don't think they've ever done this before where they put the banners of the factions in the tournament page, so you kind of know exactly which ones they're talking about. So if we take a look at the tournament itself, you can see that we have fairly generic rewards here, some Eternal Soul coins, which can be nice. That is a quarter of an Eternal Soul stone if you want to see it that way. 5-star speed glyph is not the best, but it's better than nothing. Ancient shard, so nothing crazy in the rewards here. But the thing you want to pay attention to is whether or not you have a fairly active group. In this case, you can see that we have a pretty active group. Actually, we have one of the Mad clans, Infinite, actually a very famous whale from the Mad cluster. So this is probably a loss in terms of my specific circumstances. But nonetheless, check your group and see. Sometimes people go ham in these, and sometimes people just don't even care. They don't participate, they don't like restrictions, or they don't have the champions. So check your group and see if you can compete. Ideally, in this case, you would get yourself some 6-star Relentless gear. Even though it's epic, it's better than nothing. And also, you know, you're just farming Dragon during the 3x on speed, so it's a drop frenzy, so it's not the worst thing in the world to be running Dragon regardless. It's not the case this time, but sometimes at the top here there's like a Void Shard, there's some Prism Jewels or Prism Crystals, fragments, whatever. In this case, there's no Summon Pool or Soul Summon Pool going on, so it's kind of less enticing, I would say, overall. But nonetheless, for me personally, I love challenge tournaments, so we're going to participate and see if we can snag some Relentless gear. So in terms of recommending the stages that you guys do, I always recommend starting on normal mode if this seems like a very daunting challenge, because you can scale back as much as you need to in order to make sure that the dungeon is quick and successful. So stage 25 does offer the best gear quality in terms of normal mode. Stage 20 gives you the best bang for your buck in terms of points per energy spent, so it's the most energy efficient stage. And then stage 16, if you're more earlier or mid game, it's just Void Affinity, so it's a lot easier to do. You don't have to worry about affinity issues, and you still have a chance at 6-star gear whilst cutting off like mystery shards, stuff like that. So it could be a stage that you run very quickly with minimal effort, regardless of how far along you are in the game, or you can try and challenge yourself by going into normal mode or even hard mode. So I have two teams to show you guys, one for normal mode and one for hard mode. The normal mode one is more of the like accessible one, and then hard mode is the one that is the team that I'm actually going to be running, and it's more towards the end game people or people who have a lot of champions who happen to fit the mold for this particular stage. So starting off with stage 25, the composition we have here, all epics and then one rare. We have a couple of nukers. We have Fenax in here, +2. I guess I'm just flexing my empowered epics. That's what we're really doing here, right? But Fenax here is one of our nukers. Hoskrill's our nuker, but he's also a little bit of CC with the 75% chance to stun. Stagnite is going to be our debuffer here. You can see that I'm purposefully choosing a lot of spirit champions because we are running against force, so he's more likely to weak hit unless we just take less poisons. But even if we do get poisons, we do have Reliquary Tender in the mix, so she can be our cleanser, healer, and reviver in case anyone goes down. And then we have Ferric the Fat, because honestly, I don't have that many champions who can place poisons and or HP burns on the dragon specifically, particularly in this composition, so he does that, but also the ally attacks help power up all the nukers, particularly Fenax, who notably is rocking the 5-star Crushing Rend. We love that. All right, so let's go ahead and see this team in action, and I could talk over it a little bit, talking about the AI overrides. One thing I always like to do for any like wave content is for my debuffers, in this case like Stagnite, I always have them open or don't use with their decreased defensibility, because typically we're able to kill the waves before those 2 turns are up for standard 2-turn duration debuffs. More importantly, we don't want them to waste their ability, near the end of the wave when everyone's nearly dead, or worse, just not have it ready to go at the start of the next wave. So open or don't use is something I always use for debuffers. I also have open or don't use on Hoskarul's ability to place increased defense just to power himself up, but I really only need him to do it once. I want him to focus on controlling the waves as much as possible, so he's free to use his stunning ability. I turned off Fenax's A3 just because it's a single target hit that is effectively weaker than his A1, because the A1 will be a double hitter when the enemies are under any debuffs, which we have a lot of debuffs on this squad, so that's guaranteed to happen. Varric the Fat, I think I have him open or don't use with the Brand of Shame just to bring a little bit of extra poison damage, but he's in a reflex set. We'll talk about the builds of the champions at the end of the video as always. So I want him to get the ally attack back as many times as possible. So that is our focus. Reliquary Tender, she's pretty smart with her AI, thankfully, so she's kind of allowed to do whatever she wants, and she won't really do anything unless there's a ton of debuffs on the team, aside from A1s. She won't really do anything unless there's a ton of debuffs on the team or people actually need healing and or reviving. So there we had like 3 debuffs across multiple champions, and so she actually used the cleanse. But yeah, so she's basically free to do whatever she wants. She's relatively smart, good with the AI. So you can see here Fenax doing absolute smashing work here with the A1, just putting people down, blocking revives left and right. You will notice that we're not always placing decreased defense and decreased attack from Stagnite, and that is partially because I do not yet have the sniper mastery on him. He's in the mastery queue, and I feel like I've been mentioning that for months now, and he just hasn't moved up the queue because priorities. But so we don't always land it just because he technically has a 95% chance, and believe it or not, 5% chance to fail happens way more often than you think. Think about 3% resists. So yeah, about 2 minutes or so to get to the boss, and there, the prime example of him just not placing decreased attack, he being Stagnite. So we're going to take a pretty decent smack here, but it is only stage 25 normal, so it's not going to be the end of the world. So yeah, basically Ferric the Fat is our only source of poisons, and so that is what we're doing to like have extra damage relative to the boss, or like passive damage, because dragons are notorious in the game for not being able to have their turn meter reduced, and they're also immune to decreased speed. But aside from that, obviously Hoskarul and Fenax combined with the helpful ally attacks from Ferric the Fat are the primary DPS, with the accessory damage of the poisons and HP burn from Ferric the Fat. So if I remember correctly, this team takes about 3.5 minutes or so, which isn't terrible. It's not the worst. It's not the quickest run, but you know, it's only epics and a rare, so you know, grain of salt as far as speed is concerned. Obviously I could do this a lot faster if I were to use the full extent of my account to fight this particular stage, but we're trying to make this a more friendly team, but just to show you that it's not going to be a 10-minute slog just by using epics only. It's somewhere around 3 minutes. There you go, just a little bit over 3 minutes. Ooh, speed gear, is that a good one? No, it is not. All right, and we saw that one. For the hard variation of the team, we've upped the ante. We're bringing in, of course, a mythical champion, Star Sage Galathir, who's going to be our cleanser and reviver as needed. We have Stultus, one of the best legendaries in the game for Dragon, because he is immune to poisons, and better yet, he reflects the poisons back onto the dragon, so he's effectively a poisoner once we get to that stage. You can see we don't have any other poisoners on the squad. Mordecai is in there just because extra DPS from the HP burn, but honestly, I tried to put like an attack-based nuker in this slot just to kind of help with the waves, and they would just get murdered by the dragon, and they're basically spend most of the time on the floor. So I figured I might as well put in a support who can at least kind of stay alive with a couple of hits, but also do a little bit of damage through the HP burn. Stagnite, same thing in there, decreased defense, decreased attack for the waves, and then Wallmaster Atharion, helping us do enemy max HP hits to the dragon, but also a little bit of wave clear on top of Stultus Dragonbane. So let's go ahead and run this team as well as I talk about a little bit about the AI override. Same thing, same rules applied to Stagnite. He has open or don't use on the debuffing ability, decreased defense, decreased attack, just because we want it ready for each of the waves. Wallmaster Atharion is basically allowed to do whatever he wants because he's just kind of the secondary DPS. Stultus Dragonbane, I make sure that he opens with the stun ability but doesn't use it again, just because I want him to have it up and ready to go for wave 2, because he's our only form of hard CC on this comp. But generally speaking, we just have enough damage to kind of get through the wave. So there you go, about 30 seconds for wave 1. Rinse and repeat, more or less. Stagnite does the debuffing, Atharion does whatever he can. Mordecai also has open or don't use on the AoE HP burn ability, just because we should only need it once per wave, because they're not going to take more than 2 turns, assuming he lands it. And then yeah, we got a couple of stuns there. Stultus doing work. Once again, love Stultus for this for multiple reasons. Obviously, we talked about how he works against the dragon, but almost more importantly, he brings his own increased defense, which just makes him, or supercharges his ability to be a nuker. And then of course, Star Sage Galathir, the ultimate support for this, but definitely not he's not the only champion who could do that role. It honestly could have been like a Syl of the Drakes or something like that, kind of tanky, healing reviver type champion. And so it could have been anyone, but since I have him, might as well use the best of the best. So let's see, about 90 seconds or so to get through the boss. Again, we're kind of seeing the weaknesses of me not mastering my Stag Knight, and so he just has that chance to just not place decreased defense, which is kind of a shortcoming of the squad. So yeah, there he goes, doesn't place decreased attack, which is unfortunate. We're going to take a big smack there, but thankfully he's in a shield set, so that tanks a little bit of the damage for us. Wallmaster Atharion comes in, and he does actually have block buffs as well as decreased attack, so he's kind of a backup for that role for Stag Knight when he just doesn't land it. And also he got resisted right there, which is unfortunate, but ordinarily he also places the block buffs, so that prevents the dragon from putting increased attack on himself. So once it kind of syncs up, it prevents us from taking a significant amount of damage. In this case, we just got unlucky with the 3% resist. But yeah, you can see massive heals from Star Sage Galather doing massive work to keep the team alive. This is one of those good runs, because sometimes we get bad RNG, and yeah, there you go, big smack. That's the whole point of trying to get the block buffs and decreased attack on the boss, so we don't take big smacks. But that's with decreased attack. Keep that in mind. So Dragon hard hits very hard. But yeah. Enemy max HP, super fun to use against a dungeon boss, because, you know, it's something that's less common nowadays, especially even in Dragon, just because poisons are so meta. But there you go. This is actually faster than the stage 25 team. Obviously, we're using the best of the best champions on my account. So just under 3-minute run, which obviously is a lot slower than my real team. As you see there, about a minute, but it's enough. It suffices for the purposes of this challenge. And that is the goal, you know, something acceptable that you can run relatively quickly and still get the desired result. So now, as usual, let's take a look at the builds on the champion featured on these teams, so you guys have an understanding of how they do what they do. Starting off from the bottom with Hoskarul, the Epic Squad. Savage and Perception is the build that he's in, so I built him as a defense-based nuker. 39k on the HP, 4k on the defense, 221 on the speed, full crit rate, 207 on the crit damage, so nothing crazy, and then 264 on the accuracy, which is just enough to be able to land his debuffs against waves on normal mode. For the blessing, I went with Cruelty. That's not because it was particularly useful for this fight. I used to use him in Doom Tower to clear the waves prior to swapping him out for Vlad the Nightborn, and so Cruelty was just to help decrease the defense of anyone he attacked, more importantly anyone that he stunned with a stun ability. For the masteries, he is built like a nuker, and we can see that as such. Offense tree and defense tree coming down here, notably ending on Helm Smasher to pair with the Savage set to maximize his damage. We also got Methodical for the A1, Kill Streak, and all of the kind of nuking masteries, and then Opportunist because he is a champion with a stun, and so he just does more damage to anyone that he has stunned, and typically you're faster than the wave, so this does come into play. Also, his passive, I think, it makes your team or allies deal more damage to champions under stun, and because he has a stun, we obviously want Harvest to spare. It is a CC debuff, so we have a chance to get Leech, which means you can heal up. Doesn't work against the boss, but it works great against the waves, and just kind of pathing all the way down to get Retribution as well, so we can counterattack. He's also useful if you kind of get lucky and like the dragon does end up stunning you. His A3 ability can purge the stun, and he's also immune to stun, so the dragon cannot stun him. So it's kind of a unique but interesting interaction for using that specific champion. Next up, we have Ferrican the Fat, who's in a reflex set. His total stats are as follows: 45,000 on the HP, 3,200 on the attack, so he's built with a little bit of damage, but nothing crazy. 3,200 on the defense, 255 on the speed, so fairly quick. Full crit rate, 130 on the crit damage, nothing crazy there. And then 324 on the accuracy. This is kind of built in the realm of him being able to do stuff against like hard mode Fire Knight, excuse me. And so that's why his accuracy is above 300, but it's not as important anymore because I took him out of the team for Lady Mikage. With that in mind, it's no surprise that his blessing is Phantom Touch, because like I said, I did used to use him in hard mode Fire Knight, and so Phantom Touch is just one of the best blessings for that extra hit onto the shield. And the masteries, not done, because honestly, I knew he was going to be replaced eventually. Every time I've put him in a team, he eventually gets taken out because I just have better ally tech champions on my account. So his masteries are undone. Once again, showing that you don't necessarily need masteries on all of your champions, but some of them benefit from it more. It kind of depends where they fall in your list of priorities. Next up, we have Fanax, who I actually rebuilt since the last time you guys saw him because of the 5-star blessing. He does a lot more damage, so I wanted to give him a little bit better gear, but he's still in lethal set, one of my best lethal sets, not the best that's on other champions, but he kind of has the best of the remainder that aren't on the best of the best. Anyways, I digress. So total stats here, 36,000 on the HP, 6.1k on the attack now. So that's up from like 5,600, 5,800. So quite a bit higher. 2400 on the defense, 239 on the speed. That's up like 20, so he's a lot faster. Full crit rate, 279 on the crit, or 76, excuse me, on the crit damage, so that's a little bit higher as well. And the accuracy is basically around where it used to be, so 280, enough to be able to land debuffs against any of the waves in normal mode. The blessing, as you would imagine, is Crushing Rend, because we want to take full effect, or at least as much of the effect as we can for ignoring extra defense based on enemy levels. Ideally, he would be up to 6-star, but 5-star is close enough, which means that we do get it on both hits of his A1, which is notably very, very powerful, at least the first 2 hits on any particular enemy, including when he joins in on the ally attack. And then for the masteries, it's kind of a mix of nuker as well as a bit of support of some of the accuracy stuff. So once again, coming down here to Helm Smasher to pair it with the lethal set, also hugging the left-hand side of the offense tree, which is typically like the standard debuffer route because he does provide a little bit of debuffs, and then hugging the right-hand side of the support tree for a little bit of extra accuracy and other such type stats. Didn't opt to go for the T5 on the support tree just because he's not really meant to do a lot of debuffing. He just kind of can. He has the capacity for it, but his main thing is to nuke. And so you could argue that he'd be better off with the defense tree for like counterattacking and potentially blocking revive. That'd be pretty sick. Mordecai is in a perception and a reflex set, and his total stats are as follows: 47k on the HP, 3k on the attack, although that's not really relevant. He's not built for damage. 3k on the defense, 238 on the speed, so relatively fast, not super fast, and then 376 on the accuracy. He is on my Nether Spider team. I do basically a tank and burn type strategy, not like a Geomancer composition, but just more of just AoE burn and kind of wait it out, wait for the spider or the minions to kill the main spider. So that's why he has enough accuracy for Doom Tower Hard. For the blessing, I went with Chainbreaker. Doesn't really need anything in particular. I think this was more just so he can break himself free from CC if it happens to get him. But this might be a relic of way before the rework to blessings, when they actually mattered in terms of the stats you got. I think this is one that would trend towards accuracy, so I might want to think about changing that in the future. And then for the mastery, it's fairly standard debuffer route, coming here on the left hand side, ending on War Master for a little bit of damage on bosses, then Master Hexer, notably to extend the duration of the HP burns. I probably could come out here and get lasting gifts to extend the duration of his increased attack on the same burn ability, but honestly the reflex set probably does enough work, and he's just not that important to be able to do that. So that's why I didn't opt for finishing out his masteries. Next up, we have Stag Knight in a shield set and an immortal set to boost his HP, which helps boost the shield set. That's the logic there. 73k on the HP, 2900-ish on the defense, 251 on the speed, so fairly quick, and then 365 on the accuracy, which is enough if I needed to put him in to any hard mode dungeon, like we just saw, as well as anything in the Cursed City of Centranos or Doom Tower, whoever. He can basically fit plug and play. For the blessing, as I like to do for all of my decreased defense champions AoE, I like to put cruelty on them, so he's no different. So 2-star on him, a little bit of cruelty, a little bit of extra defense reduction. And then for the masteries, as I kind of alluded to, they're not done yet. Ideally, I would just come down here and pick up Sniper, but if I go all the way down to T5s, I might as well finish out the T6 and get War Master. So that's probably going to be the plan. Pretty standard debuffer. Masteries hugging the left hand side of the offense tree and hugging the right hand side of the support tree, with Master Hexer and Sniper being the key pickups. Next up, we have Wallmaster Othar, the winner of the latest poll for champion showcases, so stay tuned for that video. Should be coming out over the weekend. I do have some cool things planned. I guess you could consider this to be a preview of what he can do in PvE content outside of Hydra, but I will dive a little bit deeper in his particular showcase video. So his build, though, perception, very complicated build, I must say, but double perception and 2-piece stone skin with a little bit of supersonic for extra resistance. So very stat intensive build, but I'm very proud that I was able to pull this off. So 52,000 on the HP, 3,300 on the attack, 238 on the speed, or 2,300 on the defense, full crit rate, 222 on the crit damage, 450 on the resistance, and then 244 on the accuracy. But once he buffs himself with increased accuracy, this effectively becomes around 350. That's what it maths out to. So that is his total stats. For the blessing, I went with Lightning Cage because I do run him in Hydra Clan Boss, of course. He is built with high resistance, so he is effectively a Mischief tank, and Lightning Cage helps Mischief tanks get an extra buff to make them targeted by Head of Mischief, and then his resistance does the rest of the work. And then for the masteries, it's a variation of the standard debuffer masteries, hugging the left-hand side of the offense tree, coming down and ending on War Master, but opting to come down the lasting gifts and master hexer split down the middle, just because I want to extend the duration of his buffs, particularly in Hydra, again, to make sure that he's the best mischief tank he could possibly be. And then of course extending the duration of his debuffs to increase attack and block buffs, because same thing, helps to keep it on the heads for longer. So accuracy stuff in the meantime, a little bit of turn meter as well. Stultus Dragonbane, basically the upgraded version of Huskarul in terms of the gear, but savage and perception, built to smack but also be accurate enough for Doom Tower, because he's one of my wave clear champions for my auto team. HP is 52,000, defense is 5k, so one of my best defensive based nukers on the account. Obviously Harima is higher, she gets a lot more focus, but she's not featured in this team. 210 on the speed, full crit rate, 239 on the crit damage, and then 372 on the accuracy, which again is enough for hard mode dragon, which I do also use him in my main team. And then again, anything for Doom Tower hard, wave clear, he has enough accuracy for that. For the blessing, I changed him from what he used to have. I think it was probably was polymorph way back when, just for the stats to get the defense, but once they redid all the blessings, I changed him over to Soul Reap, just because he is one of my nukers, and I'm looking for a 3-star soul to get that big boost of defense, so that'll bring him to like 5,500 or so a pretty substantial bump in his defense if we can get that soul in the shop. In terms of the masteries, pretty standard nuking masteries: Ruthless Ambush, Whirlwind of Death, all that stuff, Cycle of Violence, ultimately ending on Helm Smasher, again to pair with the Savage set to ignore, or have the potential to ignore more defense. Defense tree notably coming down a pretty standard counterattack route ending on Retribution, but also making sure to get Harvest to spare, because just like Huskarul, he has a stun, so the chance to get leeches and heal himself back up, which does come in clutch a lot of the time. Resurgent to potentially shake off any debuffs. So super strong, use him in a lot of content, and he was my Harima before I had pulled Harimas in terms of defensive based nukers. And then lastly, Star Sage Galathir, one of my most stacked champions in terms of resistance, the highest resistance on my account to date, and counting, with a little bit of more potential depending on rolling of or ascending gear. But he has a resistance set, perception set, and a 2-piece stone skin set, which is effectively a resistance set, and then also a 1-piece of protection as well for a little bonus resistance there. So total stats on Galathir, notably unblessed, because we have just not gotten his soul from any of our soulstone summoning sessions. I'd like to get Life Harvest at least 1 star just to get the 10,000 HP is kind of substantial, but I digress. So 84,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense, 294 on the speed, so very, very fast, and that is without his boots being ascended to speed, just because I have gotten unlucky. I guess I can show you guys that really quickly. It is somewhat tragic here, a little bit of a side tangent here, but yeah, we're 8 rolls in, 8 attempts into these boots trying to get them into speed, so hopefully the 9th one will be the one, but I'm not getting my hopes up. I need a lot more dust to make that happen. But yeah, he's one of my most important champions, so I really want to get his boots properly ascended to speed so that he's over 300. But anyways, resistance 664 on the resistance. So ideally I would get him like way above 700, but that would require like a 5-star blessing and empowerment and all that stuff. And that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. And just to synergize with his passive a little bit, 200, or almost 300 on the accuracy. So he combines both of these stats effectively to some degree in the alt form. So he's a lot more accurate just by building it with a lot of resistance. So that is the purpose of his build. Again, no blessing yet. And then the masteries, fairly standard support, high resistance build. So we're ending on Unshakable from the defense tree, picking up all the important stuff, namely Resurgent, but also the anti-Siphi approach of going Wisdom of Battle. So we can't get perma-slept, or there's a chance that he can't get perma-slept if we go against Siphis, although from my experience this never procs when I need it to, and I do get perma-slept anyways, but I digress. I opted with Master Hexer because in his alt form this could extend the duration of block active skills from 2 turns to 3 turns, which could be absolutely devastating for your enemies, so I definitely like running that. And then Spirit Haste, because in case people die I want them to go a bit faster to come back to the revival pretty soon. Lower Steel extra stats, and notably Retribution, because if he counterattacks on the base form you get turn meter, and if he counterattacks on the alt form he decreases turn meter, so that can help people kind of cut in and speed manipulation. And then Harvest to spare because he does have a stun in the alt form. So lots of thought went into his master. He's kind of picking and choosing everything along the way. So if you're just looking for what teams I was going to be running for some inspiration, then that's basically it for the video, but stick around if you want to talk about some other champions that you could use, just because some champions I don't have, or some champions I didn't feel that they were necessary in my particular iterations of the comp, but they might be useful for you depending on who you have. So let's start off with the most important debuff that you're going to want to bring into the dragon encounter, which is poisons and or HP burn. Looking at the Bannerlords, we already talked about Stultus and his passive being able to reflect it, but I want to honorably mention Helior, because you can have him set up so that when you get to the dragon, you have his A3 ready to go after the dragon poisons your entire team, and this will transfer all debuffs from all allies to the target enemy, and it converts his resistance into accuracy when using the skill. So you build him high resistance so he doesn't take the poisons himself, and you can transfer all the poisons from everyone else on your team back to the dragon using his resistance as accuracy. So pretty cool, 3-turn cooldown when you book, but you probably do want that booked. But nonetheless, if you have it optimized, he probably doesn't need necessarily to be booked. As far as direct poisoners go, Richtof the Bold obviously has the this ability here where he places 3 AoE poisons just by attacking one person. And then honorable mention to probably one of the most like useless champions in the game, but nonetheless, Rowan technically does have a 4-time hitter on her A3, each with a 100% chance of placing poison. So she can stack up a lot of poisons on the dragon if you want to use her. She's one of the champions I've always wanted to build, but she's so bad that I just can't pull the trigger. But for the high elves, oh, my dream girl, my dream girl. Elnorel would, of course, be perfect for dragon. HP burn, irresistible on the A1, couple of poisons on the A2, provided you have crit rate, and then, of course, detonating all the poisons would be super fun to run her in this dungeon, but alas, we do not have her. So if you're one of the lucky ones, she's definitely going to be S tier for this dungeon. From the Sacred Order, honestly, I do have him, but he's not built and or booked. But Corvus the Corruptor is one of those champions who can basically solo the dungeon if you have him at a regen set. You have an AoE poison and poison sensitivity on a 4-turn cooldown, which might seem bad, but effectively it could be, you can increase the duration with the A2 here on a 3-turn cooldown. So you kind of cycle through your abilities at an appropriate rate to keep the poisons up there. And then he has a passive where he just takes less damage from enemies under poison, including the dragon. So he's just a lot tankier. And then he has single target decrease attack, so when you get to the boss, he can kind of keep himself alive by placing decrease attack on the boss as well as placing all the poison. So if you're lucky enough to have him, he's probably one of the best poisoners in these restrictive factions alongside Elnorel. Cupidus, honorable mention because he does have AoE HP burn, but more notably he just has a lot of damage, so he can be a good DPS to clear the waves. And then following the same trend as Helior, you can also use Sanguinia in the exact same way, because on this ability here, 4-turn cooldown, same thing. It has a 100% chance when booked of transferring all debuffs from this champion to the target, and then it will remove all debuffs from all allies except this champion. So she cleanses all of your allies, and she will transfer any poisons on her to the dragon, provided you have enough accuracy to do so. And then lastly, from the Barbarians, I already mentioned Ferric the Fat, so he does have the poisons and HP burn single target, which you can use. For debuffers, pretty straightforward. You kind of know the heavy hitters from each of the factions. So for the Bannerlords, of course, we already showcased him a couple of times, and that would be Stagnite, AoE decrease defense, decrease attack. For the high elves, it would be Tayrel if he's your only option. It's on a 4-turn cooldown unbooked, but 100% if you want to book him to get a 100% chance. But it is on a 4-turn cooldown, but it will work if it is all you have. Some from the Sacred Order, of course, Mr. Deacon Armstrong, AoE decrease defense effectively on like a 2-turn cooldown because of his A3, so super strong, but also the Leech on the A1, which can help you heal up if you're taking a lot of damage from the dragon. And then for the Barbarians, you have a couple of options. Armina can do some work, a little bit of stun synergy with her passive, also the AoE decrease defense. But if you don't want to use her, you're probably better off just running Warmaiden, especially if you're earlier on in the game. AoE decrease defense, 3-turn cooldown on a rare, super effective. She does the job, and she can definitely work as well on stage 25 because it is force affinity. For the support category, it can basically be anyone who does some sort of healing or cleansing or anything like that. So we'll kind of speed run through these in the faction. So Manaya, after her buff, she does a little bit of cleansing, block debuff, so that can just prevent you from taking poisons and anything from the waves. Cod of the Rye has a little bit of a mini cleanse, block debuffs. Same kind of idea. If you have a Raglan, of course, full cleanse on a 4-turn cooldown. Granted, Raglan should probably get a buff at this point. She needs to do a lot more to kit. And, if you're super lucky and you have Marichka, obviously, strengthen and shield and cleansing and all that stuff. So she can, revive your team with her passive. Super powerful, of course. Everyone knows about Marichka at this point. But the honorable mention here to an epic Ulfrig, increased attack, turn meter fill, kind of like the Gorgrab Arbiter type ability, but also placing continuous heals on all allies, so it can be a pretty decent healer, as well as stealing buffs from enemies in case they get any buffs on them. And speaking of Arbiter, of course, you could use her for your team if she's your only source of revival and or healing, increased attack, turn meter boost. Obviously, you build her super fast like she always is, and she's going to help your team lap the waves. wave, so she can definitely function in that role. Honorable mention, I would say, to Deliana, just because she has this leech on the A1. If you run her in a stun set or a taunt set or something like that, she can help control the waves and also provide leech to heal up from. I think she also has another AoE here, block buffs. So stuff like that, stun set, she can work. A little bit of CC if you happen to have her. If she was a performer, like a champion chase login champion. Honorable mention as well to Shiramani, because she does have the AoE freeze, but also a good, pretty beefy heal. But she's probably less optimal just because freeze is less optimal to use. Another cool champion, honorable mention, is Skaramis, because he does have this AoE placing of provoke, so he's a CC counterattack on himself, and then when he counterattacks, he has a chance to deplete turn meter and place stun. So you can get 2 forms of CC back to back just from them having or being forced to attack him. So pretty useful there. And of course, we highlighted Reliquary Tender because she revive her cleanser and she's a rare, which is more likely for you to have than any of the other champions we talked about. And then for the Sacred Order, you could honestly use Wixwell, because increased defense and shield helps you take less damage. Intercept can block the stun or any forms of CC from the waves, whatever you might have it be dealing with. Bivolt of the Thorn, a previous fragment summon champion, honorable mention because he has a good amount of provoking in his kit, so some control, but also some shielding and some healing, so it can help support your team. Venus, of course, if you have her, decrease defense and weaken AoE, but also HP burn, so a lot of damage, or a little bit of damage and a good amount of support. If you're lucky enough to have Cardial, one of the best cleanser, healer, ally attack combo in the game. In terms of the epics, Mordecai, I already kind of highlighted him. He has increased attack to help power up your nuke if you want to do that, but also the AoE HP burn. And then of course we have Godseeker in here, decent amount of healing, a really strong revival, so decent support that could be plugged and played into basically any dungeon team. For the Barbarians, last but not least, Scylla the Drakes, of course, good mix of CC, crowd control, as well as some healing and reviving. If you have Armons, obviously he just kind of controls the waves and makes them entirely trivial, so he would be an S tier in terms of control. They would basically never go, and you could always just DPS them down. But notably, he is negative affinity for stage 25 of Dragon, so he might not be optimal there, but any other stage, obviously he can just lock down the waves solely on his own. But also noting here that if you're running some sort of poison team, if the waves don't take turns, they won't take damage from poison, so you might as well save those abilities for the Dragon if you're using an Armons type composition. And then for some of the epics, Jamarza, if you have friends and you've done the thing, obviously she does have the revival if you need some sort of revival, maybe if you're more earlier in the mid game. Aikatoon can keep your team running with the turn meter fill, and decrease speed doesn't work on the boss that we talked about before, as well as decrease turn meter, but nonetheless kind of like an apothecary to help keep your team running. I guess the apothecary, honorable mention for the high elves. And then in Skytouch Shaman, kind of niche, but technically she is one of the best healers in the game, although she kind of kills herself to do so. So if you heal her and she heals you, then you have the cleanse as well as the block debuff, so kind of the same thing. You can get rid of all the poisons. She can work, not the most optimal champion, but it can be effective depending on your needs. So there you have it. Those are my teams and my suggestions for alternatives that you can use in the dragon fight that are particularly useful. Let me know in the comment section down below if you plan to participate in this particular iteration of challenge tournaments, and let me know what team and what stage you're going to be running. Hopefully you do have an easy group, which will make it that much easier to compete for the Relentless gear. And as always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to subscribe to the channel as well if you are enjoying the content. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.